Story 1. I had just gotten out of my beat-up old car after parking in a Waitrose parking lot and was rummaging around for what I needed when I became aware of someone standing behind me. I turned around to see a well-dressed lady who I would guess was in her early to mid-50s, and the interaction went something like this. Lady, employees should park their cars out of sight. This is for customers. Me, sorry. Lady, you must move it. I don't care if it's convenient. You should move. Bearing in mind I was wearing a Marvin the Martian t-shirt, suit trousers, and dress shoes, I was, at best, perplexed, baffled, and straight-up confused. She continued, I expect certain standards. We pay for quality, and you should know this. I would love to say I came back with a witty retort, but instead I stared, probably stuttered, and she took the opportunity to turn away and make her way in. Considering these types of interactions are not uncommon in my world, I was still trying to get my head around this. After a little dithering, I decided to go back to what I was doing. For those who are unaware, Waitrose is an upmarket supermarket open to the general public. As far as I know, it's open to anyone and everyone. As it happens, I'm also not an employee. Why was I there? I had been graciously invited by a group of local charities to provide expert insight into disability and unpaid care situations. I work for a national charity in that area of work. That is my job. So I grabbed my bag of leaflets, popped up to announce who the charity was, and my privacy tent, and headed in. The privacy tent is important. If the brilliant local workers can't support someone, it is likely to be a difficult and highly personal situation, and this gives people a chance to share out of the public's view. I said hello to the organizers from the supermarket and the local charities, set up, and popped into the tent to change into my branded garb. At this point, I heard the first people come around, and I took the chance to take a few deep breaths before starting. It is surprisingly unsettling to know you are about to start asking people to share intimate parts of their lives and then have the confidence to say, and I know how to make this better. It's something that, despite being mostly true, I will never be comfortable with. Local charity worker, are you ready? We have someone here for you. Me? Yep, yeah, of course. Pops head out of the tent. Oh. Lady? That's not funny, she said to the local charity worker, then turned to me. What do you think you're doing in there? Me, sorry. Side note, I really say sorry too much. Lady, you have no idea how insulting this is. I want your manager. And you, she said, turning to the local charity worker, who is your boss? Local charity worker, clearly confused. This is the representative from the national charity, and he is offering expert advice. Lady, no, he isn't. Local charity worker, he is. Me, finally getting composure back. Hi, I'm the representative from the national charity, and I am the subject expert for this nation in X, Y, and Z. We are about to go into a discussion. Lady, stop it. No, I saw you outside. This isn't funny. You can't get people's hopes up. Me, I'm sorry, but no, I really am the subject expert. Here, let me show you some of the resources I wrote. Lady, don't insult me. I want to speak to your manager. She grabbed a guide and stormed off. I didn't have time to dwell on this. A lovely lady with her autistic son was waiting patiently to see me next. She was clearly a bit bewildered as well and asked if I really did work for who I said I did. I offered to pull up the website and show myself, but she decided the branded clothing with staff across. It was probably good enough. After a complex 20 minutes, but at least a route forward for that lady, I was expecting another person when a very sheepish supermarket manager was waiting. Supermarket manager, were you rude to this lady? He asked, gesturing to the lady. Me? No, she has been rude to me. Supermarket manager, oh. So I proceeded, with interjections from the local charity worker confirming my side of the story, to explain what had happened. Once I get going, my confidence and communication improve significantly. The supermarket manager turned and simply asked the lady to leave. "Lady, I haven't even started my shopping yet." Supermarket manager, "I am asking you to leave my store." "Lady, you're protecting your employee pretending to be a charity." She rather aggressively stepped toward the manager. "You're as bad as he is." Supermarket manager, "Please leave now, or I will have you escorted out." "Lady, really?" Supermarket manager, who seemed to have summoned security out of nowhere, said, "Yes, please leave." "Lady, fine," she said, and pushed a bunch of leaflets off a nearby table. And to be fair, she did leave. There was much apologizing, and I got a free bacon and brie sandwich, which I very much enjoyed. It's that type of supermarket. On the plus side, I have helped a few people, and it seems to have been a successful and, outside of this, uneventful event. Yet, I still can't help but wonder why she needed support, and if she could have been helped. I really hope she took the leaflet and gets in touch. Although I might get a colleague to front that inquiry, I'm not sure she will ever believe who I am. Story 2. Backstory: when I was in high school, I worked at a marina that sold gas and allowed people to dock for free if they wanted to. One day, a guy came in on a pretty big boat and bought a lot of gas, around $400 worth. He came to the counter to pay and handed me 4 $100 bills, which I accepted, and he went on his merry way. Fast forward a week or so, and my boss informs me that the bills he paid with were all counterfeit. Unfortunately, since he paid in cash, we had no way of tracking him down, so we thought he had gotten away with stealing $400 worth of gas. That is, until about a month and a half later, when this guy returns, thinking he got away with the scam. When he comes back in, I recognize him and tell my coworker to call the police immediately. However, I knew that if I let on that I had recognized him and discovered his scheme to get free gas, he would just leave. So, I decided to pretend I didn't recognize him. Fortunately for me, the guy asks to dock his boat for an hour or so on our dock, and I tell him it's not a problem. Now, it's policy to get the name and phone number of customers using free dockage, as well as asking them to leave their keys in the boat, so we can move it to a different dock if needed. He complies with all the rules, leaves his boat, and hands me the keys. After about 15 minutes of waiting, the police show up on the dock and ask my boss where the guy is. My boss tells them that he just left his boat, but we have his number and can get him to come back. He then instructs me to do just that. At this point, I was upset with this guy for making me look foolish for basically losing $400, so I called him and said, "Hey, this is my name from the marina. It seems there's an issue with your engine, and it appears to be smoking." For those who don't know boats well, engines are very expensive, and this one, in particular, was a 350 horsepower Yamaha engine, which is top of the line. That man got back to his boat in record time. When he returned to the boat, the look on his face when he saw 2 cops waiting for him was priceless. He tried to play it off, acting like he had done nothing wrong and didn't know why the police were there. But that was short-lived, as they arrested him and explained why. It turns out the guy had almost $2,000 in counterfeit $100 bills on him. Story 3. Backstory: 25 years ago, my aunt passed away when I was a baby, leaving my 2 cousins, who were both in their early 20s, to fend for themselves. My grandparents, who were very wealthy, included a clause in their will stating that the grandkids would receive half of their inheritance if a parent passed away before the children reached age 30, with the other half coming when my grandparents eventually passed. Both of my cousins received a substantial inheritance, along with the money they got from selling my aunt's house. The younger of the 2 cousins paid off her college loans and bought property, where she still lives today. The older sibling, however, squandered all his money, reminiscent of a story straight out of a book of the Bible. Within 6 years, he was back to living in a condo and working as a police officer. Everyone in our small family knew he had a substance problem, so he was barely making ends meet with his officer's salary while buying significant amounts of code word substances. Over the next 4 years, my cousin went to rehab 3 times, all sponsored by my grandparents. He sobered up after getting his girlfriend, now wife, pregnant. Unfortunately, she was an absolutely dreadful woman. She saw my grandparents as a payday and essentially trapped my cousin with a baby, thinking it was her ticket to financial security. Within 7 years, they had 3 kids, so she was locked in tight. She worked as a nurse, and with 3 kids around, they always seemed to need a little extra help. Guess who they would always ask? That's right, my grandparents. Being the kind spirits they were, they always lent a hand. My father, mother, sister, and I grew tired of it very quickly. My grandmother, unfortunately, passed away when I was 17, leaving my grandfather as the last remaining grandparent. I was undoubtedly my grandfather's favorite among the grandkids, which left a real sore spot with my cousin and his wife. I had 2 more years at home before college, so I lived with my grandpa to keep him company and help take care of him. My cousin and his wife hated this, so much so that whenever they visited and I wasn't home, they would send their 3 unruly children into my room to destroy it. My room had double doors, so it couldn't be locked. This was just the beginning. The longer I lived there, the more they would mess with me. My cousin even went so far as to place one of those little mechanical noise makers in the cabinet in my room, the kind that plays sounds at random intervals to make you think you're losing your mind. Thankfully, my German Shepherd would always hear it, and after a week or so, she finally found it. They did all this to distance me from my grandfather and deter me from taking care of him so they could swoop in and be the heroes. This continued until one of their kids found my gun. By this time, I was 18 and in the possession of a firearm. I use quotations because my grandfather had guns, but could no longer aim and shoot them due to arthritis and nerve degeneration. So, when I moved in, he placed all the weapons in my care should the need for self-defense arise. However, if he ever saw them out for any reason other than cleaning, there would be serious consequences. Being very well trained with guns and having a sense of pride in defending my home, I took this responsibility very seriously. I always kept a handgun in a locked container in my nightstand, with the key on a high shelf out of reach from the kids. One fateful day, I came home with food for my grandfather to find my older cousin, his wife, and my grandfather staring at a gun on the table. It was my gun, the one I kept in the lockbox. It was loaded and had a bullet chambered. I always kept a magazine in the lockbox, but never loaded into the gun. The lockbox was nowhere to be seen. My cousin claimed one of the children found the gun and was playing with it. I was 100% certain that he either found the key or broke the lockbox open to get to it and load it. As a 6-year-old wouldn't be able to reach a key I could barely grab, figure out what it was for, load the gun, and chamber it. I tried my best to explain that what my cousin said was nonsense, and that I never kept my firearms loaded in the house. But my cousin, who is a police officer, scolded me on gun safety and threatened to have me arrested if I didn't leave. He added that he hadn't arrested me yet, because we're family. I was asked to collect my belongings and go back to my parents' house. My cousin thought he had won, or so he believed. The next day, I apologized to my grandfather and explained to him that there was no way one of the kids could have gotten the key. He agreed with me and apologized, but thought it best that I move out until things cooled down. However, he assured me that once they did, I would be welcome back home. Unfortunately, our relationship was somewhat fractured due to the misinformation provided by my cousin. A month later, my grandfather died of a heart attack at age 86. I was devastated. I was just beginning to get back into a rhythm with him and rebuilding the trust that had been somewhat shattered. To this day, I am still unsure of what kind of man he saw me as due to my cousin's interference. Immediately, my cousin and his wife began sucking up to my dad. Since they had secured payday with my grandpa, it was time to move on to my uncle. This persisted for a month or 2, but I wouldn't stand for it. Then came time for the will. My grandfather's lawyer read out the will to me, my father, mother, and sister in our home. My 2 cousins would be briefed individually on their share of the estate, per my grandparents' requests. Then the miracle line in the will came to light. If anyone attempts to claim any part of the estate that is not assigned to them, They forfeit any assets they are supposed to receive, and those assets will be divided equally among the remaining family members. This was basically their way of saying, if you try to claim more than you're given, you get nothing. My father was supposed to receive every piece of physical property, aside from 2 or 3 items set aside for me, from my grandparents, as he was their only remaining child. The revenge. I hatched my plan. I called my cousin and told him all of Grandma's jewelry was going to be donated to a charity auction. Grandma's collection of gems and medals was extensive, to say the least, so a charity event wouldn't notice if a few pieces didn't make it right. It was a lure of enormous proportions that my greedy cousin couldn't resist. He bit right on it and headed over to my grandparents' house as soon as possible, determined to snatch up as much as he could. A handful would send his kids to college. Regardless of what I said, the jewelry was never going to him anyway, so his actions were purely his own since none of it was destined to be his. Coincidentally, my dad was on his way with the lawyer to my grandparents' house to overlook everything a formality. According to my dad's account, my cousin had 3 shoeboxes full of Grandma and Grandpa's jewelry piled on the kitchen counter, ready to be loaded into his car. My dad and the lawyer stood in the kitchen, wondering why it was all there, when my cousin walked in from my grandparents' bedroom with a 4th and final shoebox. The jig was up, and he put 2 and 2 together, realizing that I had set him up. Which was true. But there was no penalty against me for exploiting my cousin's greed, so he would mess himself up. It's worth noting that between the 18 years from my aunt's death to my grandpa's death, their wealth had increased several times over, so my cousin felt cheated and expected to receive just as much as my sister and me, despite having already received half of his share and blowing it. Throughout this whole ordeal, his younger sister, my other cousin, has not had a problem at all and is still mourning Grandpa's death like the rest of us. However, just like that, my cousin lost enough money in the course of 30 minutes to make him question his sanity over greed. My cousin's difficult wife apparently filed for divorce a few weeks later. We haven't heard from him in nearly 6 years, as he is now all but disgraced. You could call this a fairy tale ending, and in this particular part of the story, it somewhat is. There was a massive lawsuit by an unknown family member involving the Internal Revenue Service and Federal Bureau of Investigation later on. But honestly, I would rather have my grandparents. Leave comments if you want the other part of the story, but it's not really a revenge story. Story 4. The Lice. I thought I was in a slightly tumultuous, but overall enjoyable relationship for a year. I had just gotten out of a 12-year relationship when I met this guy, who I'll refer to as Mr. Deceptive. He was so charming and handsome that I thought I had won the lottery. He was very eager to say, "I love you" first and define our relationship. He even introduced me to his family, and his niece started calling me auntie. He told me about his 3 children and their mothers and lied about how the mother of his oldest child hated him and was keeping him away from his child. But then things started getting strange. His ex began calling all the time, multiple times a day. They had children together, but the grandmother had custody. The lie I was told to make it seem normal was that both of them had jobs where they traveled a lot. So they signed legal guardianship over to the grandmother to make schooling and emergency issues easier. Then she moved down to the city we were living in for work training. Later, she moved down permanently without the kids. When I asked why the kids weren't coming, the lie I was told was that they needed to stay in the same school. They are 6 and 4 years old. I'd say staying with parents is more important at that age than their peer group. It was odd, but I wanted to be the cool girlfriend, so I didn't think it was my place to tell them where their daughters should live. His work was supposedly in the cannabis industry. He worked with the ex's brother-in-law, going to legal states, buying large quantities, and then transporting it via the postal service. So, when he told me he was going to Oregon, I thought nothing of it. After a week in Oregon, a lot of his stories weren't adding up, like how his phone was always dead, even though he carried a power bank with him. Then, one of his friends started posting selfies with him, looking very cozy. I quickly put 2 and 2 together and dumped him for cheating on me with this woman in Oregon. The truth. After I dumped him, I made a messy Facebook post on his wall, which the mother of his oldest child saw. She contacted me and laid out the truth. He never contacts his oldest daughter, even though he has her cell phone number. No one is keeping him from her. He owes $20,000 in back child support for her, as he has never once made a payment. He moves around a lot and works under the table, so the mother was never able to collect garnishments or anything. He has a huge criminal record, starting with a serious crime he committed at age 15, and then a lifetime of fraud, larceny, and substance-related charges I knew nothing about. His ex, who moved to our city, was actually his girlfriend of 9 years, and they were very much still in a relationship. They willingly gave up their 2 children because they preferred to use substances. He used a certain substance, while she used a different kind of pill. There is a 4th child. He and the mother conspired to pin the paternity on another unsuspecting man, who has been paying for a child that is not his for 17 years. I was his side girlfriend. His family knew and played along with the lie, even involving their 10 and 16-year-old children. His woman in Oregon is actually his star-crossed lover from childhood, and every time they tried to be together, one or the other would end up in jail. The Oregon woman also has a criminal record, with highlights including a negligent homicide from a Dewey where she killed her passenger, fraud, larceny, and substance-related charges. This shocked me, so I paid for a criminal background check, which is how I learned of their records. The revenge. I profusely thanked the ex for telling me the truth about the situation. I mulled it over, trying to convince myself to simply consider myself lucky and just walk away with my dignity intact. But then I realized he would be winning, and I knew I had everything in my power to come down on him like Thor's hammer. I gave the ex all of his information: social security number, state ID numbers, current and past known addresses. With this, she contacted her state's child support services. Now, he will have his driver's license revoked and cannot get one no matter what state he moves to until he is current with his past payments. If he ever gets a real job, 25% of his wages will be garnished. He now has a warrant for his arrest in the state where his oldest child lives. He's trying to play house with his new girlfriend and contacted the mother of his oldest to arrange a meeting with his child and his girlfriend's child. The mother is playing nice and pretending it's a go, and he is planning a trip to visit the daughter. He will not see her at the meeting, he will be seeing the police, and they will arrest him for failure to pay, and he won't get out of jail until he pays a sizable chunk of the $20,000 past due plus bail. I gave the ex his info the day before his federal tax refund was set to go out. She was fast enough at getting his info to child support services that they intercepted his full tax refund, and now he has, for the first time, paid for something for his child. His past due child support is also going on his credit report. I know the name of the business his ex-brother-in-law owns and uses to launder his trafficking money, so I reported it to the Internal Revenue Service. He's losing his only steady income soon and can't get a job at Walmart due to his criminal record. If he does manage to find someone that hires without criminal background checks, he will lose 1/4 of his paycheck. I shared this story with 2 of my hacker friends, and they got in contact with hackers more talented than themselves. They are now going to take care of a few more things for me, like finding the man who was conned into paying for a child that's not his. Story 5. Backstory: I was recruited by a multinational corporation during the COVID-19 pandemic. My immediate manager, Sam, is extremely laid back and an outstanding leader. My manager's manager, who I will refer to as Murad, is a stickler for rules. For the purpose of this post, I will refer to Sam as my manager and Murad as my grandfather, a term used in my culture for a manager's manager. I work as an infrastructure and configuration manager, and all work passes through my gate first. If I don't pass it, it doesn't go to the next team. This means that any dip in my productivity becomes magnified down the line. However, apart from Sam, management is blissfully unaware of this dependency. Story: when I joined the company, there was no office in my city. My initial joining was for a location over 100 miles away, and all joining formalities were done online. Since then, I have never been to the office, except for a 2-week workshop, for which the company flew me in. 3 months ago, a new office opened up in my city with just 14 people. My official location was transferred here to meet the minimum requirement of 15 employees needed to open an office according to the bylaws. We are a multinational corporation that provides services to an automotive company. My work is completely remote, so I never need to go to the office. I also really enjoy working from home. The company started elective work from office last year and a hybrid model at the beginning of this year, but everything was mostly dependent on the manager's approval. Sam, who is on site in a different country, has never asked any team member to work from the office. Murad, on the other hand, expects everyone to return to the office full-time. Usually, Sam would protect us from this. Recently, Sam transferred to a different team within the same project, and a new manager took over our team. Sam remains my manager, but I no longer get to collaborate with him on my work, which is a huge disappointment. The new manager is new to the company and easily swayed by Murad. Murad, who is originally from my city, decided to come back to oversee the new office. The first thing he decided was that everyone in this city should work from the office. The other 14 employees were not affected, as they were already working from the office. They work with specialized hardware that is only available at the office. The only one affected was me. I tried to tell Murad that this would reduce my productivity, but he was not convinced. I discussed my situation with Sam, who sympathized but was not in a position to do anything about it. Now, I am a tall guy with several orthopedic challenges. I need my workstation and chair to have specific dimensions. At home, I have set up my workstation over the last 3 years, but setting up the same thing at a new office is troublesome. However, I was ordered to return to the office. Cue my next move. On my first day at the office, about 16 days ago, I spoke to the building manager and presented him with my workstation requirements. Each requirement mentioned the corresponding occupational safety and health administration OSHA violation if not adhered to. He told me it would take 45-60 days to create or acquire a workstation up to the standards mentioned. I spent the next 2 weeks in the office's relaxation zone, which has a chair I can sit in without hurting my back. However, it is not a work desk, so while I was at the office, I couldn't work. Suddenly, everything started running really slowly. Teams were sitting idly because work was stalled at my gate. There are biweekly deliveries across multiple milestones, about 6-12 deliveries every month. We missed 7 deliveries during that window. Murad was upset, but had no idea why things were stalled. The new manager was also confused. This was escalated to the CEO, who asked Sam to consult for his old project to see what went wrong. It took Sam 30 minutes to realize that my gate was stalled. He asked me on Teams to join the call to discuss what was wrong. I was obviously not on my laptop. It took a lot of back and forth, but eventually, Murad himself left his office to search for me. However, the relaxation zone is on a different floor. He couldn't find me and decided to have a separate call the next day. He left the call and caught me on my mobile. The conversation went like this. Murad, where are you? I couldn't find you on our floor. Can you please come to my office? Me, sure. I went to his office and explained the issue. Murad, why didn't you tell me this 2 weeks ago? Me, I did. I told you that making me come to the office would reduce my productivity, and the workstation issue is a building manager issue. It has nothing to do with you, so I didn't inform you. My manager knows about it. I had informed Sam when I joined the company. Murad, please work from home until your workstation is ready. The next day, which was last Friday, I was working from home. The call with Sam happened before lunch. The CEO joined the call as well. Sam asked me why things were stalled at my gate. Before I could say anything, Murad jumped in and said it was a minor issue and that work would be cleared fast. But the CEO wanted to know the details, so I presented my case. Sam agreed with me when I mentioned my condition. He also mentioned that this was specifically noted in his handover to the new manager when he left the team. I was then asked to leave the call and go back to my work. After lunch, there was another call involving Murad, Sam, the building manager, and me. The building manager informed us that it would cost the company around $2,500 to set up my workstation. Since it is a non-standard workstation, it needs to be placed in a separate room, which would be charged at $20 annually. It would take 30 days to get everything ready if we decided to proceed. Murad told me he would let me know what was decided by the following Tuesday. It's Sunday today, and I decided to write this up after receiving a call from Sam in the morning. Apparently, Murad is done working in his city and will go back next week. I can continue working from home. My workstation, chair, and separate room will be ready by the end of next month, and I am welcome to work from the office whenever I want. Clarifications. 1. MNC. This stands for Multinational Corporation, which is a common term. 2. Grandfather. In my culture, the term grandfather is used to refer to a manager's manager, following a hierarchy similar to that of a family. For example, the manager's manager is called the grandfather, and the great-grandfather would be the manager above that. These titles are used in conversation, emails, or official documentation. However, we do not actually call them by these titles in person. 3. Room charge. Since there are only 15 employees, our office space is rented in a building where several small-scale companies also rent space. An additional room is not included in the contract and would have to be rented separately. Story 6. Backstory. When I first left home to go to university, my parents co-signed a mortgage for me on an apartment-style condominium in a small Canadian city. This was 20 years ago, and the price was a whopping $52,000. They thought this was a much better and more economical choice than trying to find an apartment and deal with landlords. I loved the idea and moved into my new home. The building was almost entirely populated by the 65-plus crowd. It was small, with only 24 units split into 2 halves. I had a basement condo. It was a nice place, nothing fancy, but amazing for a student. I was young, just 19, but I was quiet, kept to myself, and didn't engage in the party scene. I got along with most of my neighbors. I'd help them out by moving heavy things or carrying groceries upstairs. I was acutely aware of the age gap and the general image of a university student, so I made sure to be just an all-around great guy to avoid conflict. The one person I could never see eye to eye with was my upstairs neighbor. For a 70-year-old woman who couldn't have weighed more than 100 pounds, she walked like an elephant. She'd have gospel music on her TV at max volume at 5 a.m. on Sundays. She'd make remarks about "that darn kid" whenever something was left out of place. She even went so far as to accuse me of breaking into her car and made a police statement saying she saw me do it. Unfortunately for her, I was out of the country on an internship at the time, but still, she persisted in being a thorn in my side. I tried to approach her about the TV issue, and her response was to make sure it wasn't just Sundays. After a couple of years of attempted diplomacy, it was clear that nothing I did would make things better. Others in the building probably knew she had it out for me, but why would this adorable little old lady try to lie and get me thrown out of the building by the condo board? She tried at least 11 times while I lived there. 7 years into my time living there, I was at my job with an ambulance service just north of the city. I got called to a shooting. One neighbor shot another over a land dispute. The neighbor survived, but there was, of course, going to be a police investigation. The investigating officers called me to get a statement and offered to come over rather than have me travel. One of them was a constable I'd worked with quite a bit, so I said sure. We set a time for about an hour after I'd get home from work. I was just getting out of the shower when they buzzed to get into the building. I said, "Come in, I'll be out in a second." I hit the door buzzer and quickly grabbed some pants and a shirt. I heard them come in and then walk upstairs. As I was trying to put on clothes, I heard them knock on my upstairs neighbor's door. They introduced themselves as being from the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Major Crimes Division and said they were looking for me. "Oh no," she said. "Oh, he lives downstairs." "What do you want with him?" They thanked her and informed her that they couldn't say, as it was an active investigation. My heart sank. But then I had a thought. It only took about 15 minutes to give my statement, and they went on their way. And then the fun began. I knew the rumor mill would be starting. She would tell everyone who would listen that Major Crimes was looking for me and that I must be some sort of criminal. I decided to see where this went. Pretty soon, I was getting side-eye in the hallway, and neighbors were steering clear of me, so I knew she had been talking. According to her, I had been arrested for robbery and kidnapping and was out on bail. I found this out when one of my neighbors, who was on the condo board, showed up with a letter demanding an explanation and threats to have me kicked out. I asked him what this was all about, and he said, "Well, Linda, not her real name, sent us a letter about what happened, and we had to have an emergency board meeting because people don't feel safe with you here." I said that per the bylaws of the condo board, before any action could be taken, I could request a meeting to review and provide a defense. Linda was on the board, so I knew she'd be there. They set a date for a week from then, but I was given a caution that it didn't look good for me and that I would have to do a lot of explaining. The meeting day came. Linda sat smugly looking at me, and the other board members were giving me dirty looks. The board president asked what I had to say in my defense. I stood and quietly distributed a letter on Royal Canadian Mounted Police letterhead, signed by the regional superintendent, stating, "Mr. My name is not under suspicion of any crimes, past or current, and has not been arrested, detained, or questioned as a suspect in any criminal matter. His duties as a paramedic will often require him to make statements regarding ongoing investigations, and in this instance on date, investigators had gone to obtain a statement about an ongoing investigation for which he was professionally involved. At no time did the members discuss, disclose, or in any way indicate that he had any involvement in any wrongdoing. I am deeply saddened by the necessity of this letter, and we will be reopening an investigation into a previous incident regarding false statements made against him." You could tell when people read and understood it. The dirty look shifted from me to Linda. She exclaimed that it must be a forgery and claimed she witnessed me being led off in handcuffs. She pleaded with them to believe her, but it didn't help her case. I stood and addressed the board, outlining the years of abuse and harassment, including the false accusation of breaking into her vehicle. I informed the board that, on the advice of my lawyer, I would not discuss the matter further with any member of the board, as Linda's use of her position for harassment opened the board as a whole to litigation, and I was still weighing my options. The next day, I had a knock on my door. The board president informed me that Linda had been removed from the board. She was given a warning about her conduct and was told that any further harassment could result in proceedings to have her removed from the building. She also received a visit from the police with a summons for providing a false statement and obstructing a peace officer. She had to attend court, where she pled guilty to both charges. She was given a suspended sentence and a 1-year condition not to harass, threaten, or intentionally inconvenience me in any way. If she abided by her conditions, she would receive an absolute discharge, meaning it would be removed from her record as if it never happened. I moved to another province before her year was up, but for a brief period of time, I actually got to sleep in on Sunday mornings.